Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. We're looking at one of the most legendary, baffling, and honestly endlessly analyzed mysteries in American history. It's the 1971 skyjacking that has completely captivated the public, frustrated the FBI, and spawned an entire cottage industry of armchair detectives for over half a century now. We all know him as D.B. Cooper, though actually, even that name is a myth. It was born from a simple reporter's error that got blasted across the wire services and just somehow stuck forever. The man actually bought his ticket under the name Dan Cooper. Over the next few minutes, we're going to unpack the facts of the case, look at the harrowing reality experienced by the crew, examine the bizarre physical evidence left behind, and explore why this unsolved crime continues to drive perfectly normal people completely crazy. Just think about the sheer audacity of this demand for a second. On the afternoon of November 24, 1971, this is Thanksgiving Eve, by the way, a quiet man in a dark suit and horn-rimmed sunglasses boarded Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 in Portland, Oregon. He ordered a bourbon and soda and then casually handed a note to the flight attendant. His demand? $200,000 in unmarked $20 bills. To put that into perspective, today that's equivalent to roughly $1.5 million. He also demanded 4 parachutes and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle. Now, the request for 4 parachutes was a brilliant psychological move. It implied he might take hostages with him, which forced the authorities to provide fully functional gear rather than dummy chutes. This calculated precision is exactly what established the folk hero myth of the suave, unflappable master criminal known as D.B. Cooper.
So, what started as a seemingly routine holiday flight rapidly built into a terrifying mid-air hostage situation. Flight 305 departed Portland at 2:50 p.m. By 3 p.m., Cooper had passed the bomb threat note. The plane then circled Puget Sound for over 2 hours, which gave the FBI time to assemble the 19 pounds of $20 bills and the parachutes. They finally landed in Seattle at 5:46 p.m., where Cooper exchanged the 36 passengers for his ransom and his gear. Then, with only the pilots, a flight engineer, and 1 flight attendant left on board, he ordered the plane back into the air. He demanded a low altitude, slow speed, and the rear air stairs deployed. At roughly 8:13 p.m., somewhere over the dark, freezing wilderness of the Pacific Northwest, the pilots felt a sudden upward pitch in the aircraft's tail. Cooper had taken his leap into the freezing rain at 10,000 feet, disappearing entirely into the night.
Let's move into Section 1, the heroic flight attendant.
Now, before we get completely swept away by the daring escape, we really need to hit the brakes on this suave mastermind myth and look at the harrowing reality experienced by the flight crew. More specifically, we need to talk about the incredible bravery of a 22-year-old flight attendant named Tina Mucklow. When Cooper opened his briefcase, she faced a profound realization of her own mortality. He didn't just make a threat. He actually showed her a large cylindrical battery attached with wires to 8 red sticks of what looked like dynamite. As the junior flight attendant, she was forced to sit next to him for hours, acting as the sole liaison between the hijacker and the cockpit. In her own words, when she saw the bomb, she thought about explosive decompression, about debris flying through the cabin, and then it hit her. She probably wasn't going to survive at all. Yet, she spent those terrifying hours praying, not just for the passengers, but astonishingly for Cooper himself. She kept him calm, successfully hiding the life-or-death stakes from the rest of the passengers so panic wouldn't ensue.
And this right here brilliantly illustrates the bait and switch of the Cooper legend. Because the passengers were released unharmed and the hijacker only stole government-insured money, the media and pop culture quickly celebrated this as a cool, victimless crime. But that completely erases the severe trauma inflicted on the crew. Mucklow and the pilots were trapped in a dark, unpressurized cabin, the door open to the howling wind during takeoff from Seattle, flying through a literal storm, fighting to keep the aircraft stable. Trauma is absolutely a form of victimization, and the reality of that night was sheer terror. It was not a Hollywood movie.
Moving right along to Section 2, curious clues left behind.
Pivoting from the human reality to the physical evidence left by our phantom hijacker, it's pretty fascinating how random, totally mundane items left on the Boeing 727 became the most heavily scrutinized artifacts in FBI history. Investigators found 66 unidentified fingerprints. They found 2 of the 4 parachutes, one of which Cooper had hastily cut open with a pocket knife, presumably to use the parachute bag to carry the ransom money, and most famously, draped over a seat they found his tie. And actually, here's where the debonair myth cracks a bit. It wasn't some bespoke silk tie. It was a cheap, black, clip-on tie from J.C. Penney. Fast forward 9 years later, and slightly upstream, we land on this figure, $5,800. In February 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was smoothing out sand to build a campfire along the Columbia River on Tennebar, Washington. Just below the surface, he unearthed 3 deteriorating rubber-banded packs of $20 bills. The FBI checked the microfilm records they'd made of the ransom money, and the serial numbers matched perfectly. It is literally the only verifiable piece of the loot ever found. To this day, hydrologists and experts still debate how those specific bills ended up buried in the sand upstream from where Cooper is believed to have landed.
Now we zoom all the way in with modern science. In 2007, a group of dedicated citizen scientists gained access to the famous clip-on tie. Using electron microscopes, they isolated particles entirely invisible to the naked eye. They found pure titanium, aluminum, and rare earth elements. Now, back in 1971, titanium was not a common metal. It was highly specialized. These microscopic particles strongly suggest that whoever D.B. Cooper was, he likely worked in a cutting-edge aerospace or chemical manufacturing facility. This pointed investigators directly toward projects like the Boeing Supersonic Transport Program.
Which brings us to Section 3, Profiling the Prime Suspects.
Armed with these incredible aerospace clues, the surviving sketches of a man in his mid-40s with brown eyes, and the sheer mechanics of the jump, you can see why a man named Sheridan Peterson became a prime suspect. Let's rapid-fire through his eerie qualifications for a second. He was an expert skydiver and former smoke jumper, meaning he knew exactly how to handle rough landings in forested terrain. He was a former Boeing technical editor, perfectly aligning with those aerospace titanium particles. Reports even indicated he opened a confidential bank account in Singapore around the time of the hijacking, and he owned a set of cufflinks that matched the exact brand of the tie clip Cooper left behind. He wasn't the only one, of course. Others, like a Vietnam veteran named Robert Rackstraw, were pursued relentlessly for years by independent investigators. But whether it was Peterson, Rackstraw, or someone else entirely, the evidence was always circumstantial.
But pulling the rug out from under all these incredible suspects, we hit this date. On July 11, 2016, after 45 years and literally thousands of leads, the FBI officially suspended the active investigation into the D.B. Cooper case, which was codenamed Norjack. They cited the need to redirect resources to more pressing modern priorities. The case was closed cold, leaving the tension entirely unresolved. No one was ever convicted, no body was ever found, and the vast majority of the money, it remains completely missing.
And that leads us to Section 4, Entering the Cooper Vortex.
So this brings us to what's known as the Cooper Vortex, and it represents a really fascinating phenomenon. When a mystery this iconic completely refuses to be solved, it acts like a black hole for human curiosity. It represents our desperate human need to make sense of things that linger just beyond our grasp. If you dig into the forums and documentaries, you'll find people who have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and decades of their lives chasing ghosts. You'll find wild numerology where people add up the serial numbers of the bills to spell out a suspect's name. As one observer famously joked, using the logic of the Cooper Vortex, you could probably prove that SpongeBob SquarePants was the hijacker. It is the ultimate rabbit hole.
So, turning the focus back to you. Based on the real trauma experienced by the flight crew, the decaying money found in the sand, and the microscopic aerospace particles clinging to a cheap JCPenney tie, do you feel the pull of the vortex? Is there a piece of evidence that convinces you? Or do you think the man who jumped into the freezing night in 1971 was swallowed whole by the forest? Will we ever definitively unmask D.B. Cooper? Think about that, and keep exploring the clues.